On the night before my son's $200,000 Manhattan wedding, I discovered something that froze me to the core. An email chain forwarded by mistake revealed that Lucas, my only son, had secretly told the wedding planner to remove me from the guest list. His words were sharp as a blade. My father doesn't fit the image. He's not classy enough to stand beside Isabel's family. Imagine reading that about yourself, written by the child you had raised with every ounce of strength you had left. My name is Edward Harrington, and I'm 61 years old. I built my career from scratch as a private wealth consultant, guiding other families to preserve their legacies. My wife Margaret passed away from breast cancer a decade ago, leaving me alone to raise Lucas. From that day, I vowed I would give him everything: the best schools, the best chances, the future Margaret always dreamed of for him. And now, on the eve of his wedding in one of New York's grandest ballrooms, I was being told I was not welcome. Not because of illness, not because of distance, but because I wasn't classy enough. Have you ever felt the sting of betrayal, not from strangers, but from the very blood you gave life to? If you're listening right now, tell me in the comments, would you ever forgive your child for treating you this way? For years, Lucas had been the center of my universe. I sent him to the prestigious Dalton School in Manhattan, then to Harvard Law tuition north of $40,000 a year. I paid for his semester abroad in Florence when he said he wanted to broaden his horizons. I bought him a BMW for his 18th birthday because he said, "Dad, everyone in my circle drives something nice." And when Margaret died, I promised her at her hospital bedside that I would never let Lucas feel like he was missing out. That guilt pushed me to work harder, to sacrifice more, to fill the void that death had carved into our lives. I thought I was keeping my promise. I thought I was honoring Margaret's memory. Lucas grew into a brilliant young lawyer, charming and ambitious, moving easily in elite circles. When he brought home Isabelle Moreau, daughter of a French banking family, I thought my sacrifices had borne fruit. She was graceful, well-educated, and their engagement seemed like the beginning of the next great chapter for both of them. I was proud not of the money, not of the glittering venues, but of the man I believed Lucas had become. Or at least the man I thought he was. The wedding itself was a spectacle. The ceremony was booked at the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel chandeliers, dripping in crystal custom floral arches imported from the Netherlands, a guest list filled with attorneys, bankers, and dignitaries. The final budget stood at $200,000. I had already transferred $120,000 for deposits, catering, musicians, the venue retainer, even the rehearsal dinner at a private rooftop overlooking Central Park. Another $80,000 was due next week. All of it came from me. So when I opened that email expecting to see menu updates or floral mock-ups, and instead saw my son's instructions, kindly exclude Edward Harrington from the guest list. He will embarrass us. We'll set up a live stream for him instead. My chest tightened in a way no heart attack could. A live stream. After 30 years of sacrifice, I was being reduced to a pixelated spectator in my own son's life. It wasn't just the exclusion, it was the hypocrisy. Lucas never minded when my uncultured checkbook paid for his Ivy League dreams. He never flinched when my so-called unpolished name signed the contracts that secured his luxury lifestyle. But standing in front of Isabel's powerful family, suddenly I was a liability to be hidden away. I stared at the screen for a long time. The words blurred, but the meaning cut deeper with each second. That was the night something inside me shifted. For 61 years, I had carried myself with dignity. I had believed that blood was thicker than water, that loyalty within family was unquestionable. But as I sat in my leather chair in the quiet of my Manhattan study, I realized loyalty without respect is nothing but chains. The father who would write any check, endure any humiliation, to give his son the world, that father was gone. What remained was a man who finally saw the truth. My son did not see me as a father. He saw me as a bank account. And I was about to remind him that even banks can close their doors. When I was a younger man, I thought building wealth was the hardest task in life. Long nights spent studying financial markets, early mornings in dark conference rooms, the pressure of managing millions for clients who expected nothing less than perfection. I thought that was the pinnacle of challenge. But I learned quickly that building a fortune is nothing compared to building a child's future alone. I was 49 when Margaret passed away. The day she left this world, I remember sitting in the hospital room, her frail hand in mine, her voice barely above a whisper. "Edward," she said, "promise me you won't let guilt make you weak. Love Lucas, but don't let him forget respect. Don't spoil him into thinking the world owes him anything." I nodded, tears streaming down my face, but in truth, I didn't understand what she meant, not then. All I knew was the unbearable emptiness of losing my partner. Lucas was only 19, a sophomore at Harvard. He adored his mother, and I wanted to shield him from further pain. So I did what many grieving fathers do. I overcompensated. When Lucas called late at night from Cambridge saying, "Dad, everyone's joining the exclusive ski trip to St. Moritz, but I can't afford it," I wired the money instantly. When he said, "My classmates are all driving new cars, I look ridiculous in the old Jeep," I bought him a silver BMW. Each decision felt like I was protecting him, proving that even without his mother, life could still be golden. I convinced myself I was doing it for Margaret. After all, hadn't she wanted the best for him? Lucas's education became my obsession. Dalton for high school, then Harvard Law. I didn't blink at the tuition invoices, $40,000, $50,000 a year. I paid them with the quiet determination of a soldier fulfilling a mission. Every late-night client call, every deal I closed, every hour I spent in boardrooms instead of at home, it all fed into the reservoir that kept Lucas's future secure. When he graduated, I paid off his student loans in full. While his classmates entered the world burdened with debt, Lucas stepped out with the freedom to choose any path he wanted. And he did. He entered a prestigious Manhattan law firm, his resume glow in his suits, tailored his smile confident. I remember standing in the back of the firm's holiday gala, watching him laugh easily among partners twice his age, and thinking, "Margaret, we did it. He's everything we dreamed of." Yet there were moments, small ones at first, that made me uneasy. I remember a dinner at Del Frisco's when the waiter brought the wrong bottle of wine. Lucas sighed dramatically and muttered, "Some people just can't get anything right." Margaret would have never tolerated that tone. She had always taught him kindness wasn't optional. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just the arrogance of youth. But arrogance left unchecked grows roots deeper than we realize. Looking back, maybe Margaret's warning had been prophetic. She knew I had a soft heart, especially where Lucas was concerned. She feared I would mistake indulgence for love, generosity for guidance. She was right. I see it now in every check I wrote without question, in every demand I met with silence, in every time I chose comfort over correction. I thought I was protecting him from pain when in truth I was insulating him from reality. And reality is merciless when it arrives all at once. Still, I don't regret the sacrifices themselves. I worked hard so my son could have what I never did. My own father was a mechanic in Queen's hands, stained with grease shoulders bent from years under hoods of broken cars. We lived paycheck to paycheck. Vacations meant a weekend trip upstate, not flights to Europe. He never complained, but I saw the longing in his eyes when neighbors spoke of Paris or Rome. Perhaps that's why I vowed to give Lucas the world. I wanted to erase the limitations of my past, to hand my son opportunities my father could only dream of. I succeeded, at least materially. Lucas had the best of everything. The best tutors, the best trips, the best life. But somewhere along the way, the best of everything became the only thing he valued. And yet through all of this, I kept faith that God was guiding us. I believed he had given me the strength to survive Margaret's death and the clarity to raise Lucas alone. I believed, perhaps naively, that the blessings of wealth and education would mold my son into a man of gratitude. But as I stared at that email the night before the wedding, those words, "He's not classy enough," I realized faith alone wasn't enough. God gives us blessings, but He also gives us responsibility. Margaret's voice echoed again in my memory. Don't let guilt make you weak. It had taken me 12 years to understand what she meant. Love is not measured in tuition checks or luxury gifts. Love is measured in the courage to demand respect even from the child you sacrificed everything for. And the time had come to find that courage. The morning after reading that cursed email, I sat at my mahogany desk, staring at the city skyline. Manhattan glistened outside my window, the Empire State Building catching the first rays of dawn, but all I felt was a cold weight pressing down on my chest. For years, my life had been reduced to numbers on spreadsheets, tuition payments, investment accounts, mortgage checks, retirement savings. I thought I understood numbers better than people. But no number in the world could measure the sting of your own son writing you out of his life. The email replayed in my mind like a broken record. Kindly exclude Edward Harrington from the guest list. He doesn't fit the image. We'll provide him a live stream link. A live stream. I chuckled bitterly. They thought it was some kind of consolation prize, as if watching my son walk down the aisle through a computer screen could replace standing beside him, giving him away, honoring Margaret's memory. I leaned back in my leather chair and opened the spreadsheet I'd been maintaining for months. The numbers stared back at me in black and white. Venue deposit $60,000 paid. Catering advance $30,000 paid. Orchestra retainer $15,000 paid. Floral arrangements $15,000 paid. Total already transferred $120,000. Remaining balance due $80,000. Grand total $200,000. All of it from me. Lucas had never questioned where the money came from. He assumed perhaps that wealth simply replenished itself like an eternal fountain. He never saw the nights I stayed in the office past midnight, the weekends I sacrificed, the deals I negotiated under crushing pressure. He only saw the outcome, a credit card that never declined, a father who never said no, and now, apparently, a man unworthy of attending the very wedding he had funded. It was almost poetic. The boy I raised, the man I financed, had decided my presence would taint the polished image he wanted to present to Isabel's family. I stared at Margaret's photograph on the bookshelf. She wore her favorite pearl earrings, smiling the way she always did, after reminding me not to spoil Lucas. Respect isn't a gift, Edward, she used to say. It's earned. And if he can't learn that all the money in the world won't save him. Maybe I hadn't listened then. But I was listening now. The more I sat with that email, the clearer everything became. This wasn't stress talking. This wasn't nerves. This was deliberate, calculated. A choice Lucas had made without hesitation. He had chosen appearance over loyalty, prestige over blood. He had chosen to treat his father like a liability instead of a legacy. And I realized something else. I had been complicit. For 12 years, I had confused indulgence with love, generosity with guidance. I had mistaken silence for peace. No more. I wasn't angry, not in the way people expect. I didn't feel the urge to shout or smash a glass or storm into his apartment demanding answers. Instead, a strange calmness settled over me, the kind of clarity that only comes when truth is undeniable. The truth was simple. If Lucas believed my presence was embarrassing, then he didn't deserve my support. I closed the spreadsheet and opened my banking portal. With a few clicks, I reviewed the letter of credit I had established for the wedding vendors. It was airtight, guaranteeing the remaining $80,000 would be paid on time. Without it, every vendor from the Plaza Hotel to the florist on Madison Avenue would demand immediate payment from Lucas himself. For the first time in years, I smiled, because suddenly I understood something vital. Lucas had taken my respect for granted, assuming I would fund his dreams no matter how he treated me. But respect is not negotiable, not even for family. Especially not for family. As I logged out of the banking portal, I knew what I needed to do next. That evening, I poured myself a glass of scotch and sat alone in the study. Outside, the city lights twinkled against the night sky, but I barely noticed. My mind was already at the Wells Fargo private banking center downtown, already signing the papers that would unravel every inch of Lucas's fantasy wedding. I whispered into the silence, as if Margaret were still sitting across from me. You were right. I should have drawn the line years ago. But I'll draw it now. And in that moment, for the first time in more than a decade, I felt something stir inside me, not guilt, not fear, but dignity. The kind of dignity that comes when a father finally stops being a doormat and starts being a man again. Monday morning, I walked into the Wells Fargo's private banking center in Midtown. The marble floors gleamed, the smell of polished wood filled the air, and the faint hum of quiet conversations surrounded me. This was familiar territory. I had spent decades of my life inside places like this, managing the fortunes of others. But today, I wasn't here as a consultant. I was here as a father reclaiming his dignity. Mr. Harrington Charles Porter, my banker for over 20 years, rose from behind his desk. He was tall, gray-haired, with a calm voice that had steadied me through more than one financial storm. To what do I owe the pleasure? I took my seat across from him, sliding a leather folder onto his desk. I need to cancel the letter of credit we established for Lucas's wedding vendors. Charles blinked. The one guaranteeing $80,000 in final payments at the plaza. That's the one. He hesitated, searching my face. Edward, that's highly unusual. Is something wrong? I let out a slow breath. The circumstances have changed. My son has made it clear he doesn't want me at the wedding. Only my money. Charles's expression tightened, but he didn't pry. He'd been in this business long enough to recognize when dignity meant more than disclosure. "Very well," he said at last. "You understand that once we revoke this guarantee, vendors will pursue your son directly. They may cancel services altogether." "That's exactly what I want." As he typed into his computer, I felt an odd stillness settle over me. Each keystroke echoed like a nail sealing a coffin, not for my relationship with Lucas, but for the illusion I had clung to for so long. The illusion that unconditional money would buy unconditional love. Charles turned the screen toward me. "Here it is. 80,000 remaining set to auto-release in 7 days. If I cancel now, notifications go out to all vendors immediately. The hotel, the caterer, the orchestra, the florist. Every contract becomes void unless your son provides his own payment." I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. With each signature, I felt lighter, as if I was shedding 12 years of misplaced guilt. When the last page was signed, Charles gathered the papers. "Edward, I've seen you make bold investments, but this is different. Are you certain?" I looked him in the eye. Sometimes generosity becomes enabling, and enabling destroys character. "I won't fund my own humiliation." He nodded slowly. "Then it's done." Walking out of the bank, I paused at the revolving doors, the city rushing past me in a blur of taxis and suits. For the first time in years, I felt the quiet strength of a man standing his ground. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't threatened. I had simply withdrawn the one thing Lucas valued most, my financial safety net. And in that act, I had given him something far more valuable: consequences. Would you have the courage to cancel everything if your own child betrayed you like this? Type yes in the comments if you'd stand your ground even when it costs you. That evening, I sat on my terrace overlooking Central Park, a glass of scotch in hand. The city glittered below, but my thoughts were with Margaret. I could almost hear her gentle voice, "Don't let guilt make you weak." For years, I had ignored that warning, hoping love would be enough to steer Lucas right. But love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's slavery. As the night breeze rustled the trees, I whispered to the empty chair beside me, "I finally did it, Margaret. I finally listened." And for the first time since her death, I felt her presence not as sorrow, but as strength. The following days unfolded with deceptive calm. Lucas called with his usual enthusiasm about the rehearsal dinner, the floral mock-ups, the orchestra rehearsal. He had no idea that the foundation beneath his dream wedding had already collapsed. Every detail he described: the imported roses, the Michelin-starred tasting menu. The champagne tower would soon vanish like smoke when the vendors realized the money wasn't coming. And I didn't warn him, because some lessons must arrive not as whispers, but as avalanches. It started with a phone call. I was reviewing quarterly statements in my office when my cell buzzed. The caller ID read Lucas. For a moment, I considered letting it ring, but curiosity won. "Dad," his voice was strained, urgent. "Something's wrong with the wedding payments. The plaza just called. They said they haven't received the final balance." I kept my tone neutral. So yes. And it doesn't make sense. You guaranteed everything, remember. The hotel says if the balance isn't settled by tomorrow, they'll release the ballroom to another client. We're talking about losing the entire venue. I swiveled in my chair, staring out at the skyline. "Did you check with your fiancée? Maybe Isabel's family contributed." "No, Dad, you don't get it," he snapped. "It was your responsibility. The contracts were under your guarantee. Now they're saying the letter of credit is void. What the hell happened? I let a quiet pause fill the space between us. Then I said evenly, "What happened is that I canceled it." There was silence on the line, followed by a shaky laugh. No, you wouldn't do that. You know how important this is." I would, and I did. By the next morning, the calls multiplied. The caterer rang furious about the missing funds. "We cannot proceed with sourcing for 500 guests without the final installment. If we don't receive payment by tonight, consider the contract terminated." Then the orchestra director. "Mr. Harrington, without funding our musicians, will not perform. We've already turned down other engagements." The florist followed. 2,000 imported roses are being held at JFK. Payment must clear immediately, or they'll be released. Each call was like a domino falling one after another. And every time Lucas's number appeared on my screen, more frantic than before. "Dad, you've got to fix this. Isabel's parents are panicking. Her father says this makes us look unreliable, like we don't belong in their circle. Do you understand what this does to me?" Finally, I leaned back in my chair and asked the question I'd been holding on to. "Do you understand what you did to me, Lucas?" He didn't answer. Because how could he? What excuse could cover the fact that he'd erased his father from his wedding? Because I wasn't classy enough. I remembered Margaret's warning again. Don't let guilt make you weak. For 12 years I had, but not anymore. By Thursday, the collapse was undeniable. The plaza officially released the ballroom. The caterer pulled out. Isabel's family, once so polished and polite, was in open uproar. I heard whispers through family contacts Isabel's mother had called an emergency meeting, livid that the Harringtons appeared financially unstable. The irony was almost laughable. A family worth millions branded unreliable because I'd finally stopped writing blank checks. That evening, Lucas stormed into my apartment unannounced. His tie loosened, his face flushed. "How could you do this to me?" he shouted the moment he walked in. "Do you realize you've humiliated me in front of Isabel's entire family? They think I'm some broke fraud." I set down my glass of water calmly. "I didn't humiliate you, Lucas. You did that when you told the planner I wasn't fit to stand by you at your wedding." He froze, his mouth opening, then closing again. The truth left him speechless. You weren't supposed to see that email," he stammered. "It was just politics." "Isabel's parents, no son," I interrupted. "It wasn't politics. It was betrayal." He sank into the armchair across from me, his voice breaking. "Dad, please. We can fix this. Just reinstate the payments. Isabel's family will forgive if the wedding goes forward. It's not too late." I shook my head slowly. It is too late. Some things once broken cannot be bought back with money. Respect is one of them. His eyes glistened, a mixture of rage and desperation. "You don't understand. Without this wedding, my career, my reputation, it's all ruined." Finally, I said the words I had waited 12 years to speak. "Then maybe it's time you learn that a man's character matters more than his image." 2 days later, Lucas showed up again, this time with Isabel at his side. They arrived unannounced, stepping into my apartment as though storming a courtroom. Lucas's eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched. Isabel looked immaculate in her cream coat, though her face was pale with fury. "Mr. Harrington?" She began, her accent sharper than usual. "This is unacceptable. You promised to support this wedding. My family is humiliated. Do you know what people are saying in Paris?" I rose from my chair, slowly folding the newspaper I had been reading. I promised to pay for a wedding I was invited to attend. But I was disinvited. Remember? Lucas groaned. Dad, you're making this bigger than it is. It was just a misunderstanding. Okay, Isabel's parents are very traditional. They wanted everything to appear perfect. Perfect, I repeated, letting the word hang in the air. And I wasn't part of that perfection. I was to be tucked away in front of a live stream like some distant relative. Tell me, Lucas, was that your idea or hers? He avoided my eyes. Isabel lifted her chin. It doesn't matter whose idea it was. What matters is that you're ruining your son's life over pride. I studied her carefully. She was beautiful, no doubt polished by privilege. But her words carried no warmth, only entitlement. Pride, I said quietly. No. This isn't pride. This is respect. A wedding built on humiliation is not a marriage worth celebrating. Lucas's voice cracked. Dad, please. Isabel's parents are threatening to call off the wedding. If you just reinstate the payments, they'll reconsider. We can still fix this. I walked to the window, gazing out at Central Park, glowing beneath the evening lights. My reflection stared back at me, an older man, weary but resolute. Fix this, I said. You don't fix betrayal with money. You fix it with character. And that's something only you can supply, Lucas. He slammed his fist against the table. This is insane. You're destroying me because you felt insulted. You've funded me my whole life. Why stop now? I turned back to him, my voice calm but firm. Because love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's slavery. And I won't be a slave to your disrespect. Silence filled the room. For a moment I thought Lucas might collapse under the weight of it. Isabel, however, wasn't finished. My father says your behavior proves the Harringtons are not a serious family. He will not allow his daughter to marry into weakness. Her words were meant to sting. Instead, they clarified everything. Then your father and I agree, I replied evenly. Because no daughter of his should marry a man who depends on another's checkbook to hold up his pride. Lucas's face flushed crimson. How can you say that to me? I'm your son. Yes, I said softly. You are my son. Which is why this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. But it's also the most necessary. For a moment I thought of Margaret again, her faith, her strength. She used to whisper prayers over Lucas as he slept, asking God to make him kind, to make him strong. I wondered what she would say if she were standing here now, and then I knew. Sometimes God allows us to lose what we idolize most so we can learn what truly matters. I met Lucas's eyes. This isn't punishment, son. This is consequence, and it's long overdue. Isabel scoffed, gathering her coat. We're finished here. Lucas, let's go. But Lucas lingered, his voice trembling. Dad, if they call off the wedding, everything I've built falls apart. I stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. Then maybe it's time to build something real. Something not propped up by lies, arrogance, or other people's money. His eyes filled with tears, but he said nothing. Isabel stormed out heels, clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. Lucas followed a moment later, shoulders slumped, like a man carrying the weight of his own choices. When the door finally shut, I exhaled. The apartment was silent again. But this silence wasn't heavy. It was cleansing. I looked once more at Margaret's photograph on the mantel. For years I had ignored her warning. But tonight I felt her wisdom as if it were written across the walls. Respect isn't optional. Not even from your own child. It didn't take long for the avalanche to come. By the following week, the rumors were everywhere. The plaza had rebooked the ballroom for another wedding, the florist released the imported roses, the caterer refused to take another call from Lucas. Word traveled fast in Isabel's social circle, faster than any press release. On Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from an old colleague. Heard the Harrington wedding fell apart. That true? I didn't answer. Some truths didn't need commentary. That evening, Margaret's sister phoned from Boston. Edward, I just spoke to a friend who saw it on social media. Isabel's family announced the engagement is off. Is it true? Yes, I said, simply. They called it off. Her gasp filled the line. After everything you've done for Lucas, I know, I said quietly. But maybe this was the only way he'd learn. The official word came the next morning. Isabel's father sent Lucas a letter through their attorneys. The Moreau family cannot proceed with a union that exposes us to public embarrassment and financial unreliability. Cold, final, brutal. Lucas called me within the hour. His voice was hollow, defeated. It's over, Dad. She's gone. The wedding, the engagement, everything. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of his words settle. I had expected anger, maybe rage. But what I heard instead was emptiness. What happened? I asked. She said she couldn't marry into shame. Her father called me reckless. Said I wasn't prepared to be a husband. He told me to return the ring. And did you? There was a pause. I didn't have a choice. He sent a driver to collect it last night. I could almost picture it, the glittering diamond slipping from Isabel's finger into a velvet box carried away by someone who didn't even look Lucas in the eye. That was how the great Harrington-Moreau alliance ended, not with vows, but with a courier. Lucas's voice cracked. Dad, I've lost everything. My fiancée, my career, prospects, my reputation. The firm heard about the cancellation. They're already whispering that I'm unstable. Clients are pulling cases from me. His pain was raw, but I couldn't offer the comfort he wanted. I had warned him with my silence, with my restraint, with every quiet sacrifice over the years. This collapse wasn't my doing. It was his. Over the next few days, the fallout spread like wildfire. The law firm reassigned Lucas to minor cases, the kind that didn't touch high-profile clients. His friends, the ones who had been eager to sip champagne in the plaza ballroom, stopped returning his calls. Isabel's family unfriended him on social media. The Upper East Side apartment, once a symbol of arrival, now looked like a prison he couldn't afford. Then came the call I'd been expecting. Dad, Lucas said one Friday night, his voice trembling. I can't pay next month's rent. It's $8,500. Without Isabel's contribution, I'm drowning. Please, help me. Just this once. I leaned back in my chair, staring at Margaret's photograph. Her eyes seemed to look straight through me, reminding me of the promise I had made. No, Lucas, I said softly but firmly. Not this time. There was a stunned silence, then a broken whisper. So you're really just going to watch me fall? I swallowed hard. Son, you've already fallen. Now it's time to learn how to stand up on your own. He came to see me 2 days later, hair disheveled, eyes red from sleepless nights. He collapsed into the armchair, head in his hands. I can't do this, he murmured. I don't know how to live without your help. I sat across from him, letting the silence stretch. For years, I had filled that silence with checks, with rescues, with indulgence. This time, I let it do its work. Finally, I said, "Then you'd better start learning, because no one else will do it for you." His shoulders shook, but he said nothing, and in that moment, I saw not the arrogant young lawyer who had dismissed me as unworthy, but a broken man staring into the abyss of his own choices. The collapse was complete. The wedding was gone, the fiancé gone, the reputation gone. And for the first time in his life, Lucas had no one to blame but himself. Sunday evening, just after dusk, I heard a knock on my apartment door. Slow, hesitant, but insistent. I knew before I opened it who it would be. Lucas stood there, shoulders slumped, his tailored suit wrinkled, his tie loose like a noose around his neck. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale with exhaustion. For the first time in years, he didn't look like a polished attorney from Manhattan. He looked like a lost boy. "Dad," he whispered. "Please, can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting him in. He walked past me into the living room where Margaret's portrait hung above the fireplace. He stared at it for a long moment before sinking onto the couch. "I can't keep up anymore," he said, voice breaking. "The firm's pushing me aside. My friends won't return my calls. I can't even pay rent. I don't have savings. Isabel's gone. Everything's gone." He buried his face in his hands. For a moment, my heart ached. I remembered the boy who used to run through Central Park, chasing kites, the teenager who stayed up late studying case law, the young man who beamed when he got his Harvard acceptance letter. But the man before me wasn't that boy. He was someone who had grown entitled, careless, arrogant. And that wasn't Margaret's son. "Dad," he said again, lifting his head. "Please, just this once. Help me get back on my feet. $8,500 for rent, maybe a little more for expenses. After that, I'll figure it out. I promise." I shook my head slowly. "Lucas, I've heard those promises before. They were always followed by another request, and another, and another." He leaned forward, desperation in his eyes. "I swear this is different. I've learned my lesson. Please, don't let me lose everything." I leaned forward too, locking my gaze with his. "You already lost everything that was built on lies and pride. What's left now is a chance to build something real. But I can't build it for you. Only you can." His voice cracked. "So you're just going to let me fall apart?" After everything we've been through, after everything Mom wanted, I pointed to Margaret's portrait. "Don't you dare use your mother's name to justify your choices. She raised you to respect people, not to use them. And she told me not to confuse love with weakness. I failed her once. I won't fail her again." Tears streamed down his face. "I hate you for this," he spat. But even as he said it, I could hear the hollow ring in his words. Hate was easier than admitting the truth. I stood, my voice calm but final. "This isn't about hate or love. It's about consequences. Do you know the difference?" He shook his head, trembling. "Punishment is something I do to you," I explained. "Consequences are something you did to yourself. This isn't me destroying your life. This is your own choices catching up to you." He covered his face again, sobbing quietly. For years I had rushed to comfort him, to rescue him from pain. But tonight I let the silence linger. Pain is a teacher, and he had ignored every other lesson. Finally, he whispered through his hands, "So that's it. You're just cutting me off forever." "No," I said softly. "Not forever. But until you learn to stand on your own 2 feet, my checkbook is closed. When you learn gratitude, when you learn respect, when you learn how to live without humiliating the people who love you, then maybe we can talk. But not before. Lucas looked up, his face streaked with tears. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Slowly, he rose from the couch, his body heavy with defeat. At the door, he turned back, once his voice hoarse. "You'll regret this, Dad." I held his gaze. "No, son. The only thing I regret is not drawing the line sooner." He left the door clicking shut behind him. I stood in the silence, my chest tight, but my spirit steady. For the first time in 12 years, I had chosen dignity over guilt. And though it tore me apart, I knew Margaret would have been proud. 6 months slipped by like chapters in a book I hadn't realized I was writing. The first weeks after Lucas walked out were difficult, not because I doubted my decision, but because the silence was deafening. For years, my days had been punctuated by his requests: wire transfers, tuition checks, rent deposits, emergencies that somehow always revolved around money. When those calls stopped, my phone felt strangely heavy in my pocket, like it had lost its purpose. But slowly, the quiet turned into something else: peace. My consulting work, freed from the constant drain of Lucas's demands, began to thrive again. I could focus without distraction, take on clients I had previously declined, even mentor younger advisors in ways I hadn't had time for. The firm flourished, not because I worked harder, but because I worked unburdened. And for the first time since Margaret's passing, I allowed myself to live for me. I began attending Sunday service more regularly, sitting in the same pew Margaret used to favor. The hymns felt different now, not reminders of loss, but affirmations of endurance. I found myself praying less for Lucas to change, and more for the strength to remain steadfast. Sometimes God doesn't change the storm, I realized. Sometimes He changes the sailor. It was at church that I met Helen Whitaker, a widow with a quiet smile and a resilience that mirrored my own. She had raised 2 children after her husband's sudden death, and we shared an unspoken understanding of what it meant to carry both grief and responsibility. We began meeting for coffee after service, then walks through Central Park. She didn't push. She didn't pry. She simply listened. And for a man who had spent years being used, being listened to felt like a gift more valuable than gold. Meanwhile, word of Lucas's downfall trickled through the family grapevine. He had given up the Upper East Side apartment and moved into a modest rental in Brooklyn. He was still employed at the firm, but the glamorous cases had vanished, replaced by tedious paperwork and research assignments. His so-called friends had melted away, leaving him to face the truth of who remained when the money dried up. Part of me ached for him. No father enjoys watching his child struggle, but another part of me knew this was the only way forward. If I had stepped in to save him again, he would have remained the same entitled man who once dismissed me as unworthy. Now stripped of luxury, he was beginning to see life as it truly was, not as a stage to flaunt wealth, but as a journey that demanded humility. One evening, as Helen and I sat on my terrace overlooking the park, she studied me quietly before saying, "You seem lighter, Edward. Like a man who finally put down a burden he should never have carried." I smiled faintly. I suppose I have. For years I thought being a good father meant never letting Lucas fail. But maybe being a good father means allowing failure to teach what I never could. She reached over her hand, warm on mine. "That sounds like wisdom Margaret would approve of." I glanced at Margaret's photograph inside the living room. For once, instead of sorrow, I felt gratitude. She had carried me through her memory, guiding me to the moment I finally chose dignity over indulgence. 6 months after the collapse, I looked at my life and realized I hadn't lost a son. I had lost an illusion. And in its place, I had gained something greater, peace, purpose, and the courage to live not as a man defined by others' expectations, but as a man defined by his own self-respect. The journey wasn't over. Lucas still had lessons to learn, and perhaps one day he would come back not as a beggar of checks, but as a man who understood gratitude. But until that day came, I would live as Margaret had wanted, strong, faithful, and unashamed, to draw the line where dignity demanded. 6 months became a year, and by then the storm had passed. Not because Lucas's life was suddenly perfect again, but because I had stopped letting his choices dictate my peace. One winter evening, I sat by the fireplace, a book open on my lap, when I caught myself listening for the phone. For so long, I had braced for the next crisis call, another plea for money, another emergency only I could fix. But the phone stayed silent, and for once I was grateful. I thought back to Margaret's final warning: don't let guilt make you weak. For years, I had done exactly that. I had mistaken indulgence for love. I had enabled disrespect, thinking it was compassion. I had chained myself to the idea that being a father meant carrying every burden, no matter how heavy. But now I understood. Love isn't about erasing consequences. Love is about standing firm so that consequences can teach. Word of Lucas's struggles still reached me. A cousin mentioned he'd taken on extra shifts at the firm, slogging through endless research assignments. Another friend spotted him riding the subway instead of gliding through the city in a luxury car. He was living modestly, maybe for the first time in his life. I didn't gloat. I didn't sneer. In truth, I prayed for him. I prayed he would come to see what money had blinded him to, that dignity cannot be bought and respect is not optional. Faith had carried me through Margaret's death, and faith carried me now. I believed God's hand was in this, stripping away the false foundations so that Lucas might someday rebuild on rock instead of sand. Sometimes grace doesn't arrive as rescue. Sometimes grace arrives as collapse. One Sunday after service, Helen and I walked slowly through Central Park, the trees bare against the gray sky. She slipped her arm through mine and asked, "Do you ever regret it, Edward cutting him off?" I paused, watching a young boy run ahead of his father, laughter echoing against the stone paths. "I regret the years I waited," I said quietly. "But not the choice itself. If I had drawn the line sooner, maybe Lucas would have learned humility before it was too late. Still, it's never too late for a man to change if he chooses to." Helen nodded, squeezing my arm. "Then you've done your part. The rest is between him and God." That night I sat alone in my study, the city lights winking beyond the window. Margaret's photograph rested on the desk. I lifted it gently, studying her kind eyes. "I finally kept my promise," I whispered. "I didn't let guilt make me weak. I chose respect for myself, for you, for the son we raised. And for the first time in 12 years, I felt complete peace. Here's the truth I've learned. You don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm. Love without respect is not love at all. It is exploitation dressed in pretty words. And respect, once lost, cannot be bought back with checks, contracts, or credit lines. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is step back and let a child fall, not because you want them to suffer, but because only in the falling will they learn to stand. That is the difference between punishment and consequence. Punishment is done to you. Consequences are born from your own choices. And God, in His wisdom, often lets us feel the weight of those choices, not to destroy us, but to refine us. So if you're listening to this now, ask yourself, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own self-respect? Would you have the courage to draw the line even if it broke your heart? Share your thoughts in the comments, because these stories aren't just mine, they're ours. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us all dignity is never negotiable, not even with family.